Buckingham Manufacturing presents Climber Inspection and Maintenance, an overview of how to properly inspect climbers and maintain pole gaffs. At the time of this video's creation, all information was current and up to date. This video is to be used as a guide, along with the manufacturer's instructions and warnings. The information contained in the instructions and warnings supersedes all information. Additional copies of Buckingham's instructions and warnings can be found at www.buckinghammfg.com. The climber was originally forged by Wilmot Stevens and then W.H. Buckingham. Both blacksmiths used an anvil and a hammer. Today's climbers may seem like a very simplistic piece of equipment, but extensive technology was developed years ago by Buckingham Manufacturing with the assistance of Western Electric to ensure a quality piece of safety equipment. To this day, Buckingham continues to develop new technology for making climbing safer and more comfortable. Climbers and gaffs are made from alloy steel and titanium to allow the correct amount of hardness, but still provide ductility rather than breaking if overstressed. All climbers go through extensive testing from raw materials to the finished product. Climbers go by many names and are sometimes referred to as hooks, climbing irons, spikes, or gaffs. Whatever one calls them, climber inspection and maintenance is a necessity to ensure safety. Climbers are part of the work positioning system, and a poorly maintained or damaged climber could result in a serious injury or fatality. As with all personal protective safety products, climbers should be inspected prior to each use. It is the responsibility of every user to inspect, maintain, and remove from service any piece of safety equipment that is deemed unsafe. The climber should meet the requirements of the ASTM F887 standard to ensure safety of the user. As we refer to various parts of the climber, it is important to know the specific names for each section of the climber. The parts of the climber include the shank, gaff, stirrup, strap attachment ring, sleeve, sleeve fasteners, and split ring. Gaffs can either be permanently attached or replaceable. Replaceable gaffs attach to the leg iron with gaff fasteners such as pins, screws, or dowel pins. The climber leg iron shank can either be contoured, where the shank top is straight with an outward curve to accommodate the ankle bone, or non-contoured, where the shank is straight from the top all the way to the base of the stirrup. There is an option of a twisted shank that follows the contour of the calf muscle to help reduce chafing. Climbers can have straight stirrups where the stirrup rests slightly on the back of the arch, or offset where the stirrup sits in the center of the foot. Stirrup widths can vary by manufacturer, but the standard models are approximately 4.5 inches wide. Narrow models are approximately 4 inches wide and offer a snug fit for a standard width boot. It is important to know the names for various sections of the gaff. They include the beehive, gaff underside, gaff cutting edge, tip, radius, or profile, gaff attachment fasteners for replaceable gaffs, and the heel of the gaff. Climbers must go through an initial visual inspection. The user must inspect the climber straps. Climber straps should not be worn too thin, have any cuts, or elongated buckle tongue holes. Inspect the buckle used to fasten the strap and make sure the buckle tongue is in good shape, the frame is not bent, and the keeper used to retain the billet is in place. Inspect the split ring on the climber strap for gouges or excessive wear. If a climber strap exhibits any of these conditions, they are unsafe to use and must be removed from service. Next, the user must inspect the climber for any marks or scribes, which could result in the leg iron breaking during use. Never scribe a mark, for example, etching initials, onto the climbers. Climbers with a deep mark or scribed mark are unsafe to use and must be removed from service. The climber sleeve fasteners should then be checked to ensure they are properly tightened. Only climber sleeve fasteners, either screws or barrel nut and screws are to be used to attach the sleeves to the climber, and 2 climber sleeve fasteners must always be used in each climber. Next, check the strap attachment ring used to secure the split ring to the climber. Inspect for wear in the ring. Also inspect to ensure the ring is properly attached to the climber. If there is damage or excessive wear to the ring, the climber is unsafe for use and must be removed from service. Check the climber pad to ensure it will hold the climber to the leg. Check all of the rivets and stitching in the climber pad. Inspect for any excessively worn or broken stitching, cuts, or extensive wear in the climber pad. If these conditions are found, the climber pad is unsafe to use and should be removed from service. If using replaceable gaff climbers, the gaff screws must be inspected for proper screw tightness. The screw must be seated and flush with the countersink in the climber. Always follow the torque specifications supplied by the manufacturer to ensure gaff is properly fastened. A required tool necessary to maintain your climbers is the maintenance kit consisting of a smooth cut file, honing stone, gaff gauge, and instructions on inspection and maintenance. After the visual inspection is complete, use a gaff gauge for dimensional verification to the manufacturer's specifications. Be sure to gauge all dimensions before making a correction. Gaff gauges are specific to the particular manufacturer's climber. First, use the gaff gauge to check the climber stirrup width. If the stirrup fits flat between the gauge notch shoulders, the climber is worn too thin and must be removed from service. A stirrup worn too thin could result in breakage. Next, check the thickness of the stirrup on both edges. If either edge fits into the thickness slot on the gauge, the climber is too worn to be used safely and must be taken out of service. To check the gaff length, place the flat side, underside of the gaff against the gauge. The gaff tip should measure beyond the center line of the gauge. Any gaff measuring less than 1 1/4 inch is too short to be used safely and must be taken out of service. Note, replaceable gaffs are to be replaced only once after the original set is worn out through normal use. After the second set of gaffs wear out, remove the climber from service. Maintenance of the 1/4 inch radius gaff tip profile is important in preventing cutout. It allows ease of penetration and reduces pole splintering, thus providing less chance for gaff cutout. Conversely, a chiseled point allows ease of penetration but can cause the wood to splinter and allow the tip to cut out of the pole. A needle point could result in the gaff tip breaking. The slot marked correct on the gauge should be your guide to proper shaping of the gaff tip. Fit the tip of the gaff into the gauge radius slot. A fit with the tip radius closely matching that of the slot is considered proper. A gaff tip that fits loosely and ends in a sharp point without the radius is unsafe for climbing and must be reshaped or removed from service. Make certain the gaff cutting edge is not rounded to ensure adequate gaff penetration of the pole. To check the cutting edge of the gaff, use the gaff gauge V slot. From the tip of the gaff to approximately 1/4 inch, only the cutting edge should touch the sides of the touch notch in the gauge as the gaff is passed through it. To check the gaff width at the 1/2 inch and 1 inch points, insert the gaff through each width check window on the gauge. The gaff tip should fall between the 2 inscribed lines. The gaff is too wide if it fails to reach the correct zone. The gaff is too narrow if it extends beyond the correct zone. If the gaff is too wide, draw file the inside flat surface evenly until the tip fits within the zone. If the gaff is too narrow, draw file the curved point or radius until tip fits within the zone. Do not file the beehive section of the gaff. Always use a honing stone to remove burrs. The profile of the gaff tip should also be rechecked after correcting the gaff width. Note that new gaffs may fall up to approximately 1/16 inch short of the minimum line due to powder coating. When the gaffs are used and powder coating wears off, the gaffs will fall at or above the line. To check the gaff thickness at the 1/2 inch and 1 inch points, insert the gaff through each of the thickness check windows on the gauge. The gaff tip should fall between the two inscribed lines. The gaff is too thick if it fails to reach the correct zone. The gaff is too thin if it extends beyond the correct zone. If the gaff is too thick, carefully draw file the inside surface of the gaff to reduce thickness just enough to allow the point to fall within correct zone. If the gaff is too thin, draw file the curved point or radius until the tip just fits in the correct zone. Always use a honing stone to remove burrs. Do not file the beehive section of the gaff. The profile of the gaff tip and the gaff width should also be rechecked after correcting the gaff thickness. To sharpen a climber gaff, one needs wood blocks to protect the climber, a vise to hold the climber, smooth cut file, honing stone, and a gaff gauge. A black marker is also helpful to ensure you are filing evenly. When shaping the gaff, draw file the underside only. It is best to place the climber within a vise with blocks on each side to protect the climber. Once the climber is securely in place, it is helpful to color the gaff in with a black marker to make sure material is taken off evenly. Take the smooth cut file and draw file the gaff from heel to tip in a smooth over and down motion. You do not need to exert excess pressure. Never cross file across or against the grain, and never file the beehive off the gaff. Remove any burrs with a honing stone. Check the gaff with the gaff gauge. Use the slot on the gauge marked correct. Remember, the gauge should be your guide to proper shaping of the gaff tip. Also, check the gaff thickness and width at the 1/2 inch and the 1 inch window with the gauge. To ensure you have a properly shaped gaff, perform the plane test or pole cutout test. A plane test can be performed to check if the gaff is correctly shaped. To perform this test, place the climber on a flat, soft pine or cedar board. Note, the gaff angle is built into the climber by the manufacturer and should be between 11 and 17 degrees when the climber is placed parallel to the surface of the wood. Holding the climber with the shank parallel to the board but with no pressure on the stirrup, push the climber forward along the board. If the gaff is properly shaped and sharpened, the gaff point will penetrate the wood and begin to hold within a 1 inch distance. If the climber slides along the wood without penetrating or merely leaves a mark or groove, the gaff is not properly shaped. The pole cutout test can also be used to check if the gaff is correctly shaped. To perform this test, place the climber on the leg, holding the sleeve with one hand, palm facing the pole. With the leg at about a 30-degree angle to the pole and the foot about 12 inches off the ground, lightly jab the gaff into the pole to a distance of approximately 1/4 inch. Keeping enough pressure on the stirrup to keep the gaff in the pole, but not so much as to cause the gaff to penetrate any deeper, push the climber and the hand toward the pole by moving the knee until the strap loop of the sleeve is against the pole. Making certain that the strap loop is held against the pole, with pressure from the leg, gradually exert full pressure of the foot straight down on the stirrup without raising the other foot off the ground to maintain balance. The point of the gaff should cut into the wood and hold. The pole surface cut should be no longer than 2 inches measured from the point of the gaff entry to the bottom of the cut on the pole surface. Remember, it is important that climbers, as with all personal protective safety devices, are inspected before each use. Climbers should first be visually inspected. During the visual inspection, take time to check over the climber straps, leg irons, sleeve fasteners, climber pads, climber strap ring, split ring, gaff, and the gaff fasteners if using replaceable gaff climbers. Next, inspect the climber with the gaff gauge. The gaff gauge inspection includes checking the leg iron stirrup width and thickness, gaff length, gaff profile, gaff width, and gaff thickness. To properly sharpen the climber gaff, remember, use wood blocks in the vise to protect the climber. Color in the gaff before filing to ensure you are filing evenly. Draw a file from heel to tip, and inspect with the gaff gauge. Once the climbers are inspected, perform the plane test or pole cutout test. There used to be an old saying at Buckingham, there are old linemen and there are careless linemen, but there are no careless old linemen.